Hi, I'm David Manti, and welcome to a new episode of the Today in Manufacturing podcast. With me this week are Jeff Reinke and Anna Wells. We each have more than 20 years of experience covering the manufacturing industry. Every week, we take the 5 most popular stories on our websites and discuss the implications they have on the industry going forward. Before we get started, please make sure to like, share, and subscribe to our podcast. You can also help us out a lot by leaving the podcast a positive review on whatever platform you use. If you want to email the podcast, you can reach any of us at Jeff, David, or Anna at IEN.com with email the podcast in the subject line. You can also subscribe to our daily newsletter. Make sure you get it delivered to your inbox first, and subscribe to us on YouTube at IEN Magazine so you can join us every Thursday when we go live. Jeff, how are you doing this week?
I'm good. Of course, as soon as you started talking, that's when I get that itch in my throat. I haven't coughed all day, but thanks for creating that moment for me.
Anything I can do.
It was definitely a reaction solely to your voice.
The crazy dry air is just really playing tricks on everything. Yeah. I like when you wake up and you're just like, am I still breathing? Is my esophagus working? It is. It's just full of blood. Whatever. It's okay. Oh, everything gets dry. No, Anna, how you doing this week?
Better than you are doing, I think.
Man,
probably, yeah.
Talking before about dry skin and now your esophagus is bleeding.
I mean, it's, there's just the dry weather causes a host of issues.
You may want to see the doctor.
I'm fine.
Okay.
Nah, I mean, but just in general, get that yearly checkup, you got to be right.
Okay.
All right. Well, before we get started, we have a word from our sponsor, Stay Sharp with Razor Leaf.
Digital strategies are transforming how manufacturers bring products to market, and staying current with technology is critical. Tune in to Stay Sharp in Digital Engineering by Razor Leaf, the podcast that dives into all things digital in products and manufacturing. Whether you're a seasoned pro or just starting your career, you'll gain insights into topics like integrating engineering and product data, creating digital threads and twins, model-based approaches, and more. Find Stay Sharp in Digital Engineering on all major podcast platforms. Search for us today.
This week's episode is brought to you by fellow podcaster Stay Sharp with Razor Leaf, the ultimate podcaster for all things digital in the manufacturing industry. Each episode takes a deep dive into the multifaceted world of digital transformation, exploring topics such as the digital thread, digital twins, IDEs, model-based strategies, and delving into the frontier of cutting-edge technologies like PLM, MES, integration, and more. All right, our first story this week. Emergency braking systems may have troubling blind spots. Automatic energy braking, not energy braking. Where am I going there? Yeah, that's not what that stands for.
Not
Anna.
that. Nope.
No, not at all. Automatic emergency braking, or AEB, is fairly common in production vehicles. But new research says some of these systems may contain worrisome blind spots. The Insurance Institute for Highway Safety, or IIHS, recently released findings from a study on the effects of high visibility clothing on AEB systems. You often see this clothing worn by construction workers and runners. Nowadays, really anything you can do to make yourself more visible to drivers, the better. Still, problems persist. The IIHS looked at the effects of this safety gear and increased roadway lighting had on 2023 models of the Honda CR-V, the Mazda CX-5, and Subaru Foresters. The tests walked crash test dummies in front of vehicles during different simulated parts of the day. The CR-V and CX-5 hit the dummy in 84% and 88% of the test runs, respectively, while the Forester avoided a collision in all but one trial. It should be noted that emergency braking technology has actually helped reduce the rate of pedestrian crashes by 27%. However, the CR-V and CX-5 didn't even slow down when the dummy was wearing clothing with reflective strips that articulated its limbs. IIHS President David Harkey says automakers might need to tweak their pedestrian automatic emergency braking systems because clothing meant to make people safer shouldn't be harder for vehicles to see. And I feel like sometimes we struggle with the difference between safe and just safer when it comes to this new technology. You know, it's safer technology, but not completely safe.
Yeah, and I think you definitely run into the issue of people beginning to rely on that technology, even though it's not great, as we're seeing from the study, which is concerning, right? I think the other thing that came to mind when I read this story was I had just read about this as well. This is something that happened this week. I saw a news report about a lawsuit that was filed by the Alliance for Automotive Innovation, which is basically like the big auto industry lobbying group. And they're suing the Department of Transportation for over these rules on AEB systems. Basically, they are trying to repeal the regulations that require almost all new cars and trucks have these systems by 2029.
Okay.
And they have some reasons that they've laid out as to why they are opposed to these specific rules. So the group says, despite the lawsuit, that they're not opposed to AEB. Nor do they have a lack of confidence in the technology. That's what they say. Instead, they call the regulation a disastrous decision because the requirements therein, they say, are practically impossible with available technology. So notably, I think you got to look at the wording there. Impossible with available technology. Does that mean that it is costly for them and they just don't want to do it? Maybe. Yeah. But also, you know, you have to look at what is contained within these rules. So they say the regs require that all cars be able to stop and avoid contact with a vehicle in front of them at speeds up to 62 miles per hour, to detect pedestrians in both daylight and darkness. The rule also says that the systems must automatically apply a vehicle's brakes at speeds up to 90 miles per hour when a collision with another car is imminent, and up to 45 miles per hour when a pedestrian is detected. I don't think any of those really sound like overreach, honestly. Like if a crash is imminent, applying the brakes.
Yeah.
Okay. I mean, being able to detect pedestrians in the day.
Yeah. No, that's, you want to be able to do that.
It seems like that's what these systems would be for.
Yeah.
But, you know, if you have the auto industry basically contending that the individual provisions are not realistic, or perhaps they're arbitrary, or they'll add cost or time, or they're saying they would serve to frustrate drivers. Maybe they would. If they didn't work correctly, they would frustrate drivers. It's not the first time we've seen the auto industry go after federal rules that they see as costly and time consuming. That's not without precedent. Yeah. In this case, though, I think it sort of serves their argument that their request is actually that the rule be reopened and modified to fit more with what is standard now in the EU, which those tend to be reasonably stringent, I think, European regulations compared to American ones, typically. But I do think that this story reflects some of those gaps that still exist with this technology. Perhaps a bit of a warning sign to pedestrians that automakers believe that the ability for these vehicles to detect pedestrians during the day and at night is too stringent. That's concerning to me as just sort of an aside to this study, right?
Right.
That not only did the study take place and reveal what it did, but the automakers do not seem confident in the ability to do that on the timeline. So takeaway, I think, is continue to look both ways before you cross the street.
Yeah. Because
nobody is, these don't work currently, and the auto industry doesn't want these. So,
well, I don't. See, when you say that, it doesn't sound to me like they don't want it. They don't want the certainty in that language. That like, okay, we need to base the language off of what we know we're capable of now.
Right.
We can't go making promises we don't know if we'll be able to deliver on.
Right. But if they don't think that they can do that by 2029, then look both ways before you cross the street.
No, I mean, I feel like it goes to say, regardless of where technology's at, you know, even when we're at full autonomy, still look both ways.
Yeah.
Just like always, you know? I mean, Safety Town should be here to stay for all kids.
Yeah.
But I mean, I don't know. That's what I get from that. It's just that, like, okay, hey, we know what we can do. It's not perfect, but we can't go promising something we don't know we're going to be able to deliver on in 2029. I don't know. Like, so I understand a little bit of pushback there.
I mean, they often do that with, you know, regulations, and it's not uncommon for those deadlines to be pushed back as everyone continues to complain. So we'll see what happens.
Yeah,
there,
it's the same old song and dance. Like, hey, you're going to hit that, right? Oh, yeah.
Actually, no.
We've been meaning to talk to you about that.
Actually, no.
You know, Jeff, I've recently come to learn that this automatic emergency braking is a far from perfect product. For example, most recently, somebody was walking their dog on a sidewalk with like one of those leashes that extends. The dog just randomly came darting towards my van and just like all of a sudden, I didn't see it. Like all of a sudden, red light on the dash and it just like free locks everything up. And it was, I gotta say, it was a very scary experience. But sure. and the dog didn't even come like close or whatever. So I mean, it was working out some kinks still.
Well, no, I think that's exactly what it's supposed to be. It's a redundant system.
Yeah.
It's not supposed to be something you depend on. And that's what I don't like about this. And, Anna was reading off those regulations or those goals for 2029. To me, those do seem out there. Yeah. To expect a vehicle to slow down when they're in a 90 mile an hour crash automatically and autonomously, you're depending on sensors and cameras. And we've shown time over time, whether it's autopilot or any of these other autonomous technologies, we have a way to go. Very simply, cameras and sensors don't work like human eyes. They just don't pick stuff up the same way. So to expect them to function in the same manner and respond that way is unreasonable, in my opinion. We always want to get better. Yeah. There's every reason to get better. AEB needs to be a technology that can do more to help prevent these accidents and save lives. But at the same time, that can't be our number one system. The number one system is the operator. Yeah. And that's what I don't like with some of the tone of this. When you hear the guy from IHS saying it's untenable that automakers don't have a solution for this, when you're talking about testing in some pretty rare elements here, like all white clothing, all black clothing at night, I don't know.
Well, I think it's the reflective. That's the
I understand, but the reflective stuff was not in every instance. It wasn't always the guy wearing the vest and the hat. Right. It was strategically located to simulate limbs and everything like that. I get that. But again, yes, push automakers, 100%. If you don't push them, they're not going to do anything more than they have to. I agree there. But again, it's a redundancy. It's not what we're counting on, number one. Yeah. And the more that we put these systems in place and tout them and say everything that they can do or we expect them to do or this has to be the case, I mean, drivers have never been worse than they are right now. I mean, don't give them more crutches. Yeah. Okay, we need to pay attention to what's going on. Situation you just described, that's why we have AEB. Yeah. Okay, because how would you notice that? How would you be able to respond in time for that? Yeah. That's where it's helpful. But I think we're expecting a little too much here right now.
Well, and I think it's okay to push the automakers, but we also, while we push the automakers to do better, we also need to push people to do better. And I think of anything, so the IIHS, they recorded some of these tests. And this is what should be the PSA. So I had them pull them out so you could look at some of the footage that IIHS has right on this study. If you guys can play this, just show this to people. And I think it might get a few more people to, look both ways a couple of times. Here, try that, see if it works. I mean, car is not moving so fast, but it is just, it blows up that, the dummy, like in plain sight. I don't know why they used a kid in all of them, but it was just, so you watch this one and just the kid comes across and gone. Like, I mean, and I'm pretty sure that's supposed to be a spine coming out, but, just show some of these tests like, hey, you think your car is safe. These are brand new cars with the best safety features out there. And they're not seeing it. And they're not seeing people in plain daylight at a crosswalk. I don't know. I think this would be the most powerful thing.
For sure. And then I think the discussion is around, if the lobbying group is suing because they don't want these rules, the discussion is focusing on the wrong thing, because if you look at how many vehicles, Consumer Reports says of 2024 vehicles, 87% of them already have both highway speed AEB and AEB that can detect pedestrians. So automakers are already doing this. Yeah. It's just not good enough. Yeah. And so I think that's the issue, is not can they do it on the timeline, but is it effective?
Yeah. What do they need to do to make it more effective? And I mean, especially for some of these automakers that say they are betting big on a more autonomous vehicle going forward. I mean, these are the steps that need to be 100% before we even take the next step forward. But I mean, I know that we could also talk about the language used around the semi-autonomy or semi-autonomous systems in cars and how that's already quite problematic. All right, our next most popular story this week. Tech founder pledges to give half of his wealth away to make the American dream more possible. Jeff Atwood is worth a lot of money. Atwood co-founded Stack Overflow, which is used by software developers, and recently sold for $1.6 billion about 4 years ago. 4 years is recent, right? That's recent. On January 7th, Atwood and his family pledged to give away half of their wealth within the next 5 years. They're going to start with $1 million gifts to 8 nonprofits this month. Atwood is worried about the dangers of growing wealth inequality in the United States. Atwood told the AP, quote, "The American dream isn't about just getting rich. It's about everyone succeeding." Initial gifts are going to a range of nonprofits, including PEN America, which advocates for free speech, Planned Parenthood, and Team Rubicon, a disaster response organization. Atwood hopes to inspire. He wants people to still believe that this dream is possible. And while some may dismiss the gesture as a virtue signaling stunt, Deborah Small, a Yale professor, says, quote, "If we want to increase philanthropy in the world, the more public we are, the better." Atwood said, quote, "When you get to this level of wealth, you really see how difficult it is for everyone else, and it's unfair. Some unfairness is okay. I'm not saying we're socialists here. I'm not in any way saying that." Really wanted everyone to know, I'm not saying we're socialists. Again, quote, "But I want everyone to have a fair shot. I think that's right. That's the way it should be. Everyone should have a chance." Anna, do you find this inspirational, anti-capitalist, maybe a touch of both?
I don't know that we could call a billionaire anti-capitalist. I mean, I think it speaks to the polarization that's happening in our society now, that he has to stress how much he's not a socialist because a billionaire giving away money.
He's not a billionaire.
No.
Well, he sold his company for $1 billion.
Yes,
right?
a multimillionaire. Yeah, he was just, it was, they went out of their way to be like, he's not in the exclusive billionaire club. He's just in the
hundreds of millionaires. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
He's just a hundreds of millionaire.
Yeah. I'm under the, I am of the opinion that a small number of people sitting on like a vast quantity of wealth is making America a worse place.
Yeah, agreed.
I just do. I mean, I think it's like an unnecessary amount of money once you get to a certain point, and all people do then are just hoarding like leverage and power.
Right. Because they control 20% or 10%, 20% of the wealth.
Yeah, it's a lot. And I do think it takes some bravery and strength of character to say, I worked hard and I got lucky, and, society valued my skills to reward me in a monetary way. It doesn't do that for everyone. Mm-hmm. But I have enough. Yeah. And I guess if you're looking for a business takeaway, which I was when I was viewing this, I think it was just like a good lesson in leadership, in my opinion, and how a leader like that can really inspire the rank and file, if you will. And perhaps the money can benefit people in a quantifiable way. Like, I do agree with some of the things that he said, and I've long thought this, that things like inequality and hopelessness are inextricably intertwined, and they lead to the types of ills in society that we keep saying we don't know how to solve, like poverty and drug abuse and, that uncontrolled mental illness and that kind of resentment and anger and rage that leads people to violence. Like, I think that is all related to people feeling like they have nowhere to go. Yeah. People feel stuck. And I'm not trying to put too much on this, but, I just think like applauding leaders who can show empathy to other people, that I think that's meaningful. Yeah. And whether you want to roll your eyes at this, I know some people in the comments did. That's fine. That's your prerogative. But it does respond to some of that workforce data that we've been seeing around people who say that they want to work for a company with which they have a common goal. Mm-hmm. They want, they want to feel like they're contributing to something beyond just the profits of shareholders. So maybe this adds to your ability as a leader to gain buy-in from your people. Mm-hmm. If they believe that you're a good person and they want to get on board with what it is that you're doing. And even if that's not even related to your business, they just think you're a good person. I think there's some value in that from a business perspective. So I thought it was an interesting story.
Well, in some of the comments, I was surprised because I thought a lot of the commenters, agreed with the gesture, but then all of a sudden we're like, whoa, who are you giving the money to? And that's what they took issue with.
Right.
I don't know. I found it to be a very interesting perspective from the top. And what we really see is the difference between people who see inequity and the luck that went into the equation, into their success, and those on the other side that believe everything was all earned and of their own making. And I think that there is a real difference there. And I do think, to your point, there is a separation there as to, how empathy helps create better leaders. But also why, you see some other harsher characteristics from people that become leaders that lead into that sort of thinking that this is all mine, I earned it, no one else gets it. But I don't know. I tend to agree with Anna, Jeff, when it comes to some of the things that wealth inequality breeds in this country. I mean, when you see a gesture like this, do you just look at Jeff Atwood and say, fine, do what you want, it's your money?
Kinda.
Yeah.
I mean, there's no wrong way to do it. Do what you want to do. I had to laugh when they talk about virtue signaling.
Yeah.
I'd never heard that before. It seems absolutely ridiculous. I mean, I don't get that one. I think it is worth celebrating this. I mean, this person is walking the walk. He said this is what he believes in, and he's sticking to it. I mean, so there's a lot in that. You always talk about leading by example. That's what he's doing. He feels this is the right thing to do. I think the example that he's setting, though, maybe it's just me, I don't think that trickles down. I think it trickles up into sort of that other peer group that does have all this money. Okay.
Well,
I think
it can be
that's
both, right?
I don't know. Does it? I don't. Is that going to influence? If I had a boss who did that, I don't think.
Exclude the other.
I'm just saying, if I had a boss who did that, I don't think that would influence me to want to give more to charity.
No, I mean, like, if you worked for a person like that, you might think, like, I feel good here. I feel good, like, working.
I would not feel more or less. They would not affect me on an emotional level, no.
So, but if you look at the data around Gen Z and Gen X and what they're looking for in a workplace, that is part of it. And maybe it's just a generational shift, but like, I think like some of our generation above is a little bit more like head down, you go to work and get your job done. But the younger generation has said that they feel like they want to do good in the world and they want to be aligned with a company that shares their values, things like that.
So you're saying that if you worked for a leader that you knew gave generously to programs like Wounded Warriors, you wouldn't feel a little extra buy-in?
No.
Really?
No, I mean, that's their right. They can do it. Just like they're not going to tell me how to spend my money.
Right.
I'm not going to put a different level of influence or appreciation on them based on what they do.
Okay.
I value them as people based on how they are. If it is in their blood to be more charitable, yeah, of course that makes you a great person to be around and you're going to attract others, but it's not going to make me feel like this is a better person to work for because they do more charity work. Well, no.
And I think that when they say charitable giving like this creates or gets other people, inspires other people to be philanthropic, I think they are talking about more that multimillionaire and the billionaire class versus rank and file.
I think, that old saying about birds of a feather, that type of thing. So if those are the types of individuals you are looking to bring into your company, yes, it will have that impact. Me, there's a sort of church and state separation in how I view the people that I work with and the individuals I have personal relationships with. Yeah. So to me, that's different.
Wait, what are you saying, Jeff? You just view us as colleagues and nothing more?
We have a personal relationship because we've done stuff out of work.
Just gonna be quiet. No, but you look at when I round up,
sure,
at the when I get food and you're just like sap.
I do the same thing, but it doesn't make me. It doesn't make me think more or less of you if you don't do that.
No, I got you. It really is. I think it is different for everybody. But what do you think about his perspective? How he makes it to the top. He has the American dream. He starts from nothing, bootstraps it, sells it for billion. 1.6 billion, and he finally gets to the top, and he was just like, "Wow, this is so improbable for everybody else. Let's try to make it a little bit easier." That's a crazy perspective.
Agreed. And I think it's something I can't relate to because I've never been like, money, what's that? Who cares? And him being in that ability and be able to recognize that is very impressive.
Right. It's like he climbed Everest and like really took stock in the bodies he passed along the way. Just like it's, not so few make it,
True.
And I don't know. I thought it was a very, it seemed like he was coming from a very unique perspective and a very genuine place. Whereas, yes, sometimes efforts like this are labeled as virtue signaling, and you're just like, yeah, it looks like they're just doing that as a PR stunt, and this didn't come off as a PR stunt to me.
No. And I mean, obviously, in the end, like if you have $200 million and you give half of that away, you still have $100 million. But a lot of people don't do that, So.
Yeah, it's staggering to think of what it would take to spend that. Like I want an update. I want Brewster's billions. And he's just like, you just can't spend $1 billion. You can't do it. You got to buy a country. All right. Well, our next most popular story this week. FTC sues John Deere for unfair corporate tactics and high repair costs. The Federal Trade Commission has sued John Deere over alleged practices tied to increased equipment repair costs for farmers and depriving farmers the ability to make timely repairs on critical farming equipment. According to the FTC, Deere has limited farmers and independent providers the right to repair Deere equipment for decades. The maneuver forced farmers to rely on authorized dealers for necessary repairs, which boosted Deere's multi-billion-dollar profits. Historically, farmers repaired their own equipment, or called a local independent service provider. There is an alternative repair tool, but it's reportedly missing critical information. The FTC wants to force John Deere to grant large tractor and combine owners, as well as these independent repair providers, access to all repair resources offered to authorized dealers. A lot of times these are, let's just say, Regwald or restricted access to authorized dealers only. They want to open that up to everybody. In a response, Deere said the lawsuit is based on, quote, flagrant misrepresentations of the facts and fatally flawed legal theories. The company says the FTC lacks, quote, basic information about the industry and John Deere's business practices, and confirmed that the agency was instead relying on inaccurate information and assumptions. Deere also said that the FTC filed the lawsuit amid active negotiations over a potential resolution. The company insists it plans to introduce new self-repair capabilities, allowing customers and independent repair technicians to reprogram Deere-made electronic controllers. And Anna, I understand that big corporations move slowly, but John Deere has had just plenty of time to address this ongoing right to repair issue.
Yeah, they have been in the middle of this repair drama for many, many years. That is true. And it seems to me that if they were willing and able to solve this problem for their customers, they could and would have done so by now. Mm-hmm. I know that they're referring to these ongoing negotiations. And I think what they're referencing there is in 2023, they signed a memorandum of understanding with a farm group that basically said, all right, we give up. We'll let you repair your vehicles. At the time, experts called it meaningless because it was not binding in any way. There was no language in that MOA that was pertinent to how it would be enforced or how it would play out, the details therein, none of that. So the way I saw this was maybe this lawsuit speeds that up.
Yeah.
I tend to side with the farmers a little bit here only because, and I'm, maybe this will come across as anti-business. It's really more anti-monopoly. If you look at Deere, they control 53% of the U.S. market for large tractors and 60% of the U.S. market for combines. If you look at what a court defines as like monopoly power in an industry, they usually go on like the 50% or more. And in cases. So if you look at like Deere being above that in both of those key categories for farmers, like obviously we know that it is the best and most available equipment that is out there, you know? So, if you look at how much power they have in the industry, and they have been criticized in the past for what, critics call like bullying behavior of their suppliers, their customers, prioritizing shareholder interests above all else, which is not, you see that. It's not exclusive to them. Like whether you agree or disagree on whether John Deere is a bully, that's up to you. But I do think it's fair to acknowledge that they've long held a lot of power in these discussions. And perhaps the FTC has had enough of the slow play on this, and they just want it to get done. That's the way I see this.
Yeah. Do you think part of that is the FTC wanting to see it get done, and also Deere kind of slow playing it because they might have a more favorable outcome in the new administration?
Well, I think they were going to slow play it no matter what, because they don't want to. They don't want to do it.
Yeah, well, I know that initially they don't want to do it, but then we start getting closer to things, and it's just like, well,
we'll see what happens.
Maybe we don't have to address this at all.
Oh, certainly, and who knows what's going to happen now? Maybe this all goes away, and we've seen a lot of drastic changes just in the last few days of the new administration. Anything could happen, but I do think that they have been sort of taken their time on it for a reason.
Yes, anything certainly can and has happened so far. Jeff, having grown up in rural communities, we were closer to these farmers. And, I talked about it before, but my father-in-law retired and became a full-on farmer. And the equipment that he buys is older equipment because he wants to repair it himself. While he could probably be doing a more efficient job that saves him some time and money in the long run, he wants the ability to repair that equipment himself. And as a result, he has to rely on legacy equipment. And I think that, that's something that should be available to anyone that owns equipment. They should have the right to repair it.
Agreed. Okay. Overall, I get it.
Yeah.
Okay. What this takes me back to, and what's also interesting here is when you look at CNH, AGCO, Kubota, they've all signed these sort of right to repair agreements with the major groups. So John Deere is the last holdout, which is kind of unique. This takes me back, and Anna will probably remember this too, covering the automotive aftermarket 20 years ago. The Right to Repair Act was a huge deal for independent service providers. Yeah. Okay. The independent garages wanted the access to all of this information. Basically what happened is GM and Ford and Toyota said, here you go. Try to figure it out.
Yeah,
they were aftermarket scan tools that were developed just specifically to handle these OBD2 systems and beyond on all of these vehicles. The independent repair market got it, looked at it, said, man, this is really hard.
Yeah.
Okay. This is a huge level of investment. And even when you get that, when you are not ordained, if you will, within those types of vehicles, specifically with all the new technologies that came out, there was a lot of problems that emanated from that. And a lot of times these independent providers, these independent shops were saying, you're gonna have to go to the dealership.
Yeah, go to the dealer.
So there is sort of a precedent here for John Deere saying, in the long run, we might be helping you out a little bit.
Yeah.
No, I understand there's all these things that Anna was talking about that also play a bigger part of it. They have been piloting programs in Canada to help roll out some of this information to the independent market. So they are slow playing it. But I think there is also, if you want to look at the glass being half full or being a little more optimistic on John Deere's tactics here, maybe they are trying to get it right because there is a historical precedence for this not going well. When you did throw all of this information and all this technology out to the independent market, it wasn't always grabbed onto and used as effectively as it could be. Yeah. So there is some of that at work here as well. You're talking about growing up in, farm country. It's just a different world. I mean, I think these guys all know they are not fixing this equipment anymore.
Oh yeah.
And it is different. It is unique. The other thing that I would say is I don't mind John Deere monopolizing, that's maybe the wrong word, or trying to get a better part of the service market if they're going to use some of these resources then to do some of the things that we've talked about John Deere doing with autonomous technology. Yeah. That is going to be a huge boon for agriculture going forward. And a lot of those connected technologies as well, the IoT type stuff that they're integrating into farming equipment and software and everything else that can help these folks be more efficient. If that's where some of this is going, I can appreciate that. Maybe be a little more transparent with that as opposed to just looking like, hey, just bring it here and we'll take care of it. We don't want you guys dealing with these independent folks.
Well, and I think part of the problem is that basically they have two different playbooks where if you're a John Deere service provider, you get everything. And if you're not, you kind of get half or less, however much
you can figure out.
Whatever you can figure out. And you're right. How many times do we talk about some of these automotive companies that want to become like a mobility company? Like we saw in the Toyota story last week or 2 weeks ago. And probably the first one that's going to actually transition to be a mobility company is going to be John Deere. Just because of how much it has invested in the equipment and the communication system and all that data and how it's going to be used. I could see John Deere being a mobility company before like any of the major automakers.
100% agree.
So, all right. Well, our next most popular story. Fire at one of the world's largest battery plants in California forces evacuations. Last week, 1,500 Californians were ordered to evacuate after a major fire at one of the world's largest battery storage plants. According to the AP, a fire broke out at the Moss Landing Power Plant, which is about 77 miles south of San Francisco. The plant is owned by Vistra Energy, a Texas company, and it contains tens of thousands of lithium batteries. The batteries store power from renewable energy and have become a growing electricity source, especially in some of these areas that experience rolling blackouts and other energy crises. Each battery can burn at more than 1,000 degrees C or about 1,800 degrees Fahrenheit. This had tens of thousands. Local leaders called it a disaster, but the fire didn't spread beyond the concrete building it was enclosed in. The plant is no stranger to fires. In 2021 and 2022, fires broke out after a fire sprinkler system malfunction caused overheating problems. We still don't know what caused this latest fire, but everyone did make it out of the plant, out of there safely. I guess, Jeff, if we can look at this and learn take one good thing out of this, it's that the building held and didn't start another wildfire in California right now.
I mean, that's where my mind went initially when we saw this story come out. Like, was it part of the wildfires that were going out of there? Yeah. Not the case, thankfully. I think what this illustrates is there's a lot we still have to learn when it comes to storing properly these lithium-ion batteries. I mean, they didn't even try to put this fire out. They just let it burn. And if you saw any footage on it, it was angry looking. It was, man.
It looked like it was about 1,800 degrees Fahrenheit.
And it looked like they just kept pouring gas on it.
Yeah.
It was kind of crazy. So a lot to learn here. Hopefully we have to get better at storing this stuff. What I started thinking about too is we're looking at a lot of these types of facilities being built and seeing as growth opportunities for a lot of different geographic areas, especially in the U.S. See something like this. What type of not in my backyard type of mentality could this possibly generate? Everybody touts the benefits of nuclear energy. Nobody wants a reactor in their backyard. Mm-hmm. We talk about a lot of these other different types of factories that have tried opening, food processing facilities. People don't want that in their backyard. Is that going to lead to the same dynamic here? And if that happens, what does that do to a supply chain? We know we need these batteries for everything from cars and really lithium ion power tools. I mean, it's universal application right now. In the short term, it doesn't look like we're going to be missing out when it comes to even this many batteries burning up. It seems like they figured it out. But I think what it does is it puts more strain on recycling. We need to figure out how to make the most of all these rare earth materials that are in all these batteries. We can't be losing them.
Well, and I think, because this plant essentially is a stopgap or a safety mechanism for if the grid goes down.
Right.
And it can be used for ancillary power in this crisis. But I mean, we always talk about our grid problems. And I think that when you look at where we are and where we're trying to get when it comes to a grid, like there are going to be some crazy growing pains along the way. And, are you a little bit more open to have this in your backyard? If it means that the next time there's a blackout during a potential blizzard, you get power. I mean, I think that, when it comes to a food processor, you can fight that because you can see like it's just going to smell bad. Right. And it's going to pollute the groundwater. Where this is like, okay, maybe the hottest fire on record, but also, maybe I don't freeze to death in the event of a blackout. So I don't know. I don't know how people would feel about that.
Yeah, definitely. risk reward. I don't know the right terminology to use there, but
or move. Maybe I don't know.
Just continue getting better at making sure we're taking care of this stuff safely. And it'll be interesting to see what the cause of this one was.
Yeah. Anna, we're going to see more and more of these in areas like California and Texas and throughout the U.S. areas that are a little bit more at risk. What are your thoughts on this as like a potential stopgap, storing renewable energy, and how maybe something like this makes people kind of push forward in terms of we need a better solution for our grid to be able to support this kind of renewable energy and one that maybe doesn't burn as hot so fast?
Yeah, I think, Jeff, you mentioned trying to get better at storing these and figuring out the best way to do that. And unfortunately, or maybe fortunately, they do have better ways of storing them. And those were not utilized in this specific scenario. And that was one of the things that I thought was interesting when I was reading some industry input about this particular situation. So I, Inside Climate News, interviewed a battery expert, and I thought the report was pretty interesting. It talked about how many of the battery storage systems like this are being stored outside in containers that basically serve as a first line of defense in case of any sort of disruption there. Because if a fire starts, not only does it have to eat through that container, but it also has to like jump across the concrete to get to the next one.
Sure.
Yeah.
As opposed to what happened here at can't remember the name of this plant. Moss.
Yeah.
It was an indoor storage installation, and these experts are saying that there's really this growing body of evidence that suggests that there is a higher fire risk when you store these batteries inside. Not to mention this was a very old plant. It was repurposed. It was very large scale. There was a lot of batteries in there. Maybe they should have been stored further apart so they weren't so close to catch, because once one goes and then they're that close. So that was one thing that they had said was possibly problematic about what happened in this specific scenario. The other was the batteries. And so this type of lithium ion battery that was used in this storage facility was nickel, manganese, cobalt, which is still the most popular lithium ion battery. I think it has got still like a little bit north of half market share. However, it is losing market share because its energy density is really high, which tends to make these types of batteries a little bit more unstable. A lot of money, as we know, has gone into battery development. So there's a bunch of different types that are now like emerging and taking some of that market share. The trend is towards these batteries that have a lower energy density because they do not deal with as much of this thermal runaway that you see with lithium ion batteries, which are these super insane hot fires that you cannot put out.
Right.
So between those two things, the fact that these were these very high energy density batteries and they were stored in a way that was really suboptimal based on what we know about where they should be stored, it just wasn't a good scenario. And then, I agree that it does generate discussion and certainly concern. I think that's generally a good thing if it means that private and public stakeholders are coming to this with an objective of like, how can we do this in a way that's safe and makes sense based on what we know? I don't think you're going to see less NIMBY when you have people like Glenn Church, the county supervisor, say this is a 3-mile island event for this industry.
Yeah.
Thanks, Glenn.
Not good.
No, but I don't think that it is. I think that it was an unfortunate situation, but like if we can't make lithium ion batteries work with the emerging technology that's kind of taking hold here, and then also what we know about storing them and the more we use them, the more we know, but they're in so much right now. So like, what do we,
yeah.
Like you can't just be like, nope, sorry, we're done. One fire, we're done.
Yeah.
You have to look at EVs again. You got to look at your phone again. You got to look at all that stuff, Well,
and as battery technology is evolving, so is battery containment technology. I mean, we've seen tests from Southwest Research Institute. They're conducting tests on new novel fire mitigation techniques and basically different ways to store these types of batteries or things that hold these batteries. So that way, if there is a thermal runaway event, it is more contained. I guess that is one thing that is kind of upsetting about the story is that you don't want to see a pile of these things. You want to see like, okay, different containers full of them. So that way, if one goes, the entire thing doesn't go. But I think that's part of, I guess with as fast as this technology is moving, maybe we have to move a little bit faster with it. You know, when people see that thermal runaway is so dangerous and it is so risky to have so many of them together, be like, you know what? We got to get in. We got to get into the Moss Landing plant and really start divvying these up, start moving them around.
Right. And like, who was the decision maker behind the fact that this was also operating next door to a functioning natural gas plant? Like, I don't know. It just seemed like there was a lot of, how much worse could that have been?
Yeah.
Where should we build the matchstick factory? I know.
I've got an
next
idea.
to a gas refinery.
That is remarkable. That's when it becomes the 3 Mile Island event.
For sure.
Oh my God.
That would have been worse.
No, it was, honestly, all told, this is one of those stories that just could have been so much worse. And, a lot of people got lucky. But, according to some subsequent reporting by the AP, California and Texas are only going to be opening more of these large-scale battery projects than anywhere else in the U.S. to help with power reliability issues, especially when there are more extreme weather events. So we're going to see more of these. Hopefully the ones that exist and the new ones continue to evolve with the tech.
And not like just shoehorn this into whatever retrofit situation that you're trying to fill a plant space. I think that was the other problem, is that it was not dedicated for this use. So what needs to happen is this needs to be a very deliberate choice as to location and then how these are stored.
Or use it as an attack on renewable energy.
Or that. Yeah. 3 Mile Island, man.
All right. Our most popular story this week. Molson Coors rejects Leinenkugel family's attempt to save a brewery. The Jacob Leinenkugel Brewing Company plant in Chippewa Falls, Wisconsin is gone. Molson Coors, which owns the Leinenkugel's brand, announced the closure of the 150-year-old brewery January 6th as part of a restructuring effort. The news came as a surprise to former Leinenkugel president Dick Leinenkugel, who told local news affiliates that his family was not made aware of the decision ahead of time. Just days before the brewery closed, for good, the Leinenkugel family tried to buy it. The family sent Molson Coors a statement that included a request to enter into a non-disclosure agreement, which would allow both parties to discuss a potential brewery acquisition, after which the family would take over the brewery's operations. Molson Coors told the family, no thanks. No, it said that it remains committed to the Leinenkugel brand and appreciates the family's effort, but declined to take things any further. Anna, is this the end of the brewery story, or does the Leinenkugel family have another card to play?
I don't know. I don't think so, honestly. It's a sad story, of course. I think it certainly speaks to the Leinenkugel family's commitment to the region. Mm-hmm. But without any details, it's really hard to know what this offer looked like.
Yeah.
Because we know that Molson Coors isn't selling the Leine's brand. I think that, so did the Leinenkugels want to just buy the space? Did they want to become a contract brewer?
Kind of what it feels like. They wanted to be a contract manufacturer, yeah.
Yeah, so I don't know. I mean, it just, to me, looking at it that way, and if that's, that's my best guess as well, Jeff, but it also feels like very unlikely to fit into the established business plan that they have put together for beer production, considering that they just probably very thoroughly evaluated it for its cost implications, enough that they were shutting this brewery down. And secondly, and I don't want to sound like a monster here, but
that's me. Don't worry about it. I'm already the monster from that second story.
On.
Let me, I'll tee it up and then Jeff can... if the Leinenkugels wanted to meticulously preserve the brand that they'd built on their own terms, then they should not have sold Leinenkugels. They had a chance to control the fate of this brewery.
Yeah.
And they sold it.
They sold it.
They did. I mean, and I'm not saying they did anything wrong by doing that, but you can't have it both ways.
Yeah. No, that's not being a monster. You're being a realist.
Well, okay. I'm trying to be.
No, I don't think that's being a monster at all. And I feel like, and maybe that family's feeling feeling a lot of that pressure right now.
Yeah. Well, and I do. I think that you can certainly have empathy for the community. And I do think this is going to be a brutal blow to the community. I do.
Yeah.
So I can see why everyone is very upset by it, including the Leinenkugel family. But I don't believe that Molson Coors necessarily owes anything to them, this last minute bid to negotiate something that they've already kind of worked out in their company. It just felt like a too little too late kind of situation. It does tug at our heartstrings because it came from Leinenkugel's, but beyond that, I just didn't think it was very viable. And also like kind of not fair to Molson Coors at that point because you already walked away. You know?
Is this just a last-ditch effort by the family to save face in the area?
I mean, it could be. I think their intentions may be good here. Just like, hey, maybe we could revive this. The community probably is very important to them. But I just don't think it's realistic.
Well, okay, so maybe the hailest of Marys yet to come is, okay, they weren't able to transition it while it was functional. When they close the doors, it's going on the market. So they could always buy it and launch the Evacuations brand.
What?
That's Leinenkugel backwards.
Okay. Yeah.
Sidestepping
that. But I don't think... I don't know what to do with that.
No, but okay. So, but what about the idea of, okay, you couldn't transition it while it was open. What about if you really want to keep it open, when it goes on the market, you can buy it?
But I think they are keeping it open. I think that's what's kind of misunderstood here. I'm just looking at a statement from Adam Collins, He is their chief communications officer. And he said, while the decision to move brewing to Milwaukee was a challenging one, we're committed to maintaining a strong presence in Chippewa Falls. That's why we'll continue taking excellent care of our facilities, opening our doors year-round to thousands of guests. Our pilot brewery will continue serving as an innovation hub, and the Leinenkugel Lodge will continue to be a gathering place for locals and out-of-towners. They're going to keep the facility itself. There's still brewery tours. The Leinenkugel Lodge is still there. So they are still making money off of this facility. Why would they give it to somebody else?
But isn't that what's across the street, the Leinenkugel Lodge, and like the pilot plants and everything? But they're still doing structure.
According to the website, they're still doing tours of the brewery. It's still an asset that they're going to use either from a marketing, promotions, whatever you want to call it. It's still theirs and they still intend on using it.
Yeah.
They ceased making beer there. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Okay? They're not doing that, which I think is what Leinenkugel's wanted to do to save those 65 jobs. And you can appreciate, I think they had the best of intentions. To Anna's point, we're going on almost 40 years since they sold the business here, though.
Yeah.
And even though there were still 3 Leinenkugels, I think, working there, it's moved on. It hasn't been Leinenkugels for a very long time. It's been Miller and Molson Coors.
Yeah.
So I don't know if it's even sad. And to your point, though, I think this could definitely circle back. At some point, this big global brewer might say, why are we holding on to this little backwater facility here? We don't need this. Let's sell it.
Yeah.
And so this may come full circle very shortly. I think right now was probably bad timing for the Leinenkugels to try this. You just made this huge decision, maybe not even huge, but impactful decision to close this location. Let it simmer a little bit and circle back.
Yeah.
Probably not the best time to try to get in there and sort of muddy the waters a little bit.
So you're saying if the family gets back in, wants to start its own little craft brewing imprint, that Evacuations, maybe
I would
not
stay
the first
away
one?
from that one.
Okay.
David, stick to math.
Working
Your strong
titles.
point is numbers, not letters.
Yeah, so it would be Evacuations, only like the E's would be 3s.
Let it go, man. Just let it go.
I don't know.
I know you're trying to show off how good you have gotten at pronunciating all these difficult names that come up.
Yeah. I'm just saying that now that I've said it for a 4th time, Evacuations, it's really starting to roll off the tongue.
Well, maybe that's your brand, man.
Yeah.
Put in an offer.
In my spare time, I'd like to pursue one of my passions, like beer.
Exactly.
All right. Well, if anything, when it normally comes to these types of closures, I mean, really, it just winds up becoming a footnote in the company's legacy. And I don't know, every once in a while, it's nice to see that the family that was associated to kind of fight like hell to maintain it, to do whatever they can. I don't know. Normally, it's just like, them's the breaks, just like that's how business is done. And even if this was just kind of spinning wheels. I don't know. I thought that it went a long way in keeping the Leinenkugel family in good favor in Wisconsin.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Before we jump into, in case you missed it, the stories maybe not as popular on our websites like manufacturing.net and Industrial Equipment News. We have another word from our sponsor, Stay Sharp with Razor Leaf.
Digital strategies are transforming how manufacturers bring products to market, and staying current with technology is critical. Tune in to Stay Sharp in Digital Engineering by Razor Leaf, the podcast that dives into all things digital in products and manufacturing. Whether you're a seasoned pro or just starting your career, you'll gain insights into topics like integrating engineering and product data, creating digital threads and twins, model-based approaches, and more. Find Stay Sharp in Digital Engineering on all major podcast platforms. Search for us today.
This week's episode is brought to you by fellow podcaster Stay Sharp with Razor Leaf, the ultimate podcast for all things digital in the manufacturing industry. Each episode takes a deep dive into the multifaceted world of digital transformation, exploring topics such as the digital thread, digital twins, IDEs, model-based strategies, and delving into the frontiers of cutting-edge technologies like PLM, MES, integration, and more. Check it out today, right after you're done listening to this. Go check out the last episode, see what you thought. All right, in case you missed it, again, story's not as popular on the sites, still might make a big impact on the industry going forward. If you guys are cool with it, I'll go first this week. I grabbed kind of a feel-good story, a little, in the feels. Designer is bringing fictional Wayne's World gadget to life. Candy Phelps is a web designer based in Madison, Wisconsin, who also loves Wayne's World, like many people of good taste do. It's a good thing they never made a sequel. As a kid, she particularly liked the licorice dispenser mounted to the roof of Wayne's 1976 Pacer. And as an adult, she wanted to buy one, but it didn't exist. So, more than 30 years after the movie came out, she's finally filled that empty space in the market with a real-world version of the contraption, the Party On dispenser, which she sells online through her company, Motormouth. Now, I picked this story because it introduced me to a new term, which was called defictionalization, and that is where you take things that are like the licorice dispenser or something that's in a movie or TV or in a book, and you actually make it a real product. And I guess especially as we're living in this era of intense nostalgia, we see this quite a bit. And when it becomes easier to do limited run manufacturing, find a cheaper manufacturer. I think she found a contract manufacturer in China to do this small run. I think it's kind of cool when you see products like this. Our colleague Andy Zoll received the real life replica of the Simpsons phone that calls Moe's Tavern when you pick it up. I think that as we see more products like this, I don't know. It's cool. It's very indicative as where we are in terms of disposable income as a culture. But I don't know. I think it's a neat idea, and I think that it's a good story that shows you can be 30 years away from that dream that you had, and it's still attainable, And while she may have only sold 100 of these so far, which means she has another 900 lined up in her apartment, I think it's cool, and I think it's worth checking out. Jeff, I don't know if you had a chance to see this story, but it's one of those things where I was just like, you know what? You did it. You always wanted to. You took a chance. Sure. And another thing was that, she spent a year designing, prototyping, and testing this. And it took that long because Phelps and the rest of her product designers, they all have full-time gigs. So they kind of just did this whenever they could get to it.
Yeah. No, I mean, good for her. If this is something you wanted to do, I think it's pretty cool that you're able to sort of chase this passion, and follow through on this. I think also a lot of very interesting lessons learned from a product development perspective when they talked about in terms of figuring out how to get something that could cut the licorice and the different mounting variations that they went through to try to figure it out. Yeah. So just a lot of great problem solution type of exercises here, which regardless of how well this works out, I have a hard time believing there isn't a lot she can take into other walks of life or her job or whatever the case may be. So cool story. I think it's fun when you see somebody sort of, again, realizing something that they always wanted to defictionalize.
Yeah.
So,
well, and I mean, you're right. When you look at it in the movie, it's just a carriage bolt fired through the top of the pacer. Yeah. And I mean, that's not practical. So they worked on many different ways to mount it that made it functional. And I don't know. I thought it was, a lot of times we do these stories on a product design or concept. And this to me sounded like one where I was just like, when Ben was talking about the story, I'm like, oh, so like, when did it not work out? And he's like, no, she made them. It was a pleasant surprise. I guess to either of you guys, when you think of defictionalization, is there any sort of product that you could think of that you would want sort of a real life version of?
Easy.
Yeah.
Lightsaber.
Oh, lightsaber.
Without a doubt.
I mean,
so many applications.
You would argue that, okay, so like a legit. Yeah. Okay, because I would say they've come pretty close. It just without the,
they have to contain the
without
light.
The fire hot laser that cuts people in half. I mean, they've done a pretty good job with that one so far, making a toy version. Yeah. But I mean, just
without. I mean, that's functional. The first one.
I mean, getting ready for ice fishing. I mean, what better way to cut a hole than just like, hold on a second, guys.
One of numerous reasons. Exactly.
Anna, what did you think of the story?
I loved it. I was a huge Wayne's World fan when I was a kid. And just as a point of clarification, the Mirthmobile was Garth's car, not Wayne's car.
Oh, apologies.
I thought that was the case.
Okay.
Yeah. Just so, credit where credit is due.
Understood.
But yeah, that it's such a great scene in the movie. And I haven't thought about that thing since then.
Yeah.
But as soon as I read about this, I was like, well, of course I want that in my car. Like, why would I not want that?
Yeah, absolutely. And I certainly need some red rope licorice right now as well.
Yes, exactly.
No, I'm actually like, I hate myself for getting that wrong. But the only thing I was bagging on Ben about with this story was I was like, you needed more references in there. Yeah, like after every sentence, I need like a we're not worthy. We need a Milwaukee in there. In Madison, Wisconsin, just down the road from Milwaukee. I just
get the net.
Yeah, just like random head banging. But so I would, if you get a chance, check out motormouth.com and this, if anything, because it's a fun design, and you don't have to put one in your car, but do what you can to help support it. All right. Who wants to go next? Anna, what's your final thought? In case you missed it this week.
Sure. So I picked a story about the Honda and Nissan merger talks, just because I thought there was a lot of info in this article that raised some questions, and it just made me think a little bit more about whether this is going to happen or not. So the story is about how Honda reportedly wants Nissan to triple its profits ahead of the merger deal.
Yeah. A couple of red flags in the deal.
Sounds easy enough. Nissan's like, oh, you know what? Actually, it would be better if we had more profit.
Yeah. We've been actually looking at quadrupling it, but I mean, hey, if tripling's good for you too.
Yeah, tripling's fine. That would be fine. So anyway, the report was talking about some of the non-negotiables potentially that are being revealed, including reports that Honda wants Nissan to triple its profits by August of next year. And if you consider that Nissan's operating profit plummeted 90% in the first half of its fiscal year, the reason why they're even having these discussions to begin with, they say that would be tantamount to about a $2.6 billion profit increase. A Bloomberg report also says that Honda doesn't want Nissan's partner Renault. They just don't want it.
Yeah.
But they're afraid that Nissan could fall under undesirable foreign influence if a third party from a foreign country were to buy up the 35% stake that Renault currently has in the Nissan-Renault alliance. So they want Nissan to just buy Renault's stake outright, which would mean shelling out more than $3.5 billion. A lot of stuff there, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So, but perhaps the most interesting part of this article are these rumblings that the Japanese government might be pushing the merger behind the scenes. And I was not aware of this until I read this report, which I think Bloomberg put out last week. But basically the idea is after Foxconn expressed interest in buying Nissan, the idea is that Japan would do basically anything to see that one of its legacy historic brands not fall into the hands of a Taiwanese company. So interesting when you consider too, because, we've talked a lot in the past about Nissan's former chairman, Carlos Ghosn.
Yeah.
The fugitive.
Yeah, who's just throwing out pointers for the company from undisclosed location.
Yeah, well, he's in Lebanon.
Well,
just like he's got a lot to say about this, but he says that he doesn't see it. Basically, he thinks the synergies are tough to find between these two companies. He does not understand the deal. So for me, all of this said, it just raised so many questions about what's happening here. Like, can and will Nissan comply with Honda's demands? That's a lot of money to come up with. Is Honda sabotaging this? Like, do they want to do this? Like, how much influence does Japan ultimately have over whether this happens or not? These are all big questions that I think about what's going on between Nissan and Honda. So I'm like fascinated to see what happens next. So much weird stuff.
Well, and I think it's pretty clear that either, they don't want it to happen. But what would they have to do to triple profits? Like, fire everybody? It's just fire sale everything they have. Like
that's the thing. I think what's interesting there is the term that they use: profits, not revenues.
Yeah,
they're not saying sell more cars. Yeah. So what they might be looking to do is basically say, get this in order, so then when it does happen, it's seamless. Yeah. In terms of your right size, you got the right people have already been weeded out. Whatever you want to say. Yeah. That seems to be a part of the tactic here. Or to Anna's point, they just don't want to do it because there's nothing like saying, "Hey, you guys are great." Yeah. But you need to be a lot better.
Yeah.
Well, and if does Honda get involved in telling them what to call? And that could be cutting brands, all that stuff. And then what if it doesn't go through? Just, I don't know how this works. I've never merged two auto companies before, guys. So I don't know how this works, but it seems like a lot is going on here.
I feel like a lot of people have been in situations like this where it's just say no. Your kid.
If you don't like me for who I am,
yeah. This sounds like when you're on the wrong side of the engagement, and they're just running through the laundry list of why it's a no, and you're just like, a simple no would have been fine.
Does this happen to you?
I'm just saying people may have had experience, or on the parenting side, when your kids have a big ask and you're like, all right, yeah, we can go to the water park as long as you clean your room, the garage, mow the lawn, and do all these things. And then they do them and you're like, oh, I didn't see that coming.
Now I have to go.
Or they just turn around and the kid can see it in your eyes. They're just like, you could have just said no, Dad.
Now I got to buy a Nissan.
Yeah. Or when you say maybe and they're just like, we know maybe means no. But this was a wild one because as you were putting together this piece, there was it was you kept finding more information about and they have to do this. And it's not just hey, a simple triple your profits and then we're fine. But this is, it looks like Honda's not feeling it.
Maybe not. I don't know.
But did they set any deadlines on it as to when the deal's got to be done?
Well, it's supposed to be done by August of next year.
Okay.
So there's some time to figure this out.
To triple profits.
Triple profits, yeah.
For 1 year.
To fire everybody. Right? And sell cars via some sort of e-commerce solution.
Who knows?
There you go.
All right. Got it all figured out.
Just start selling all the services.
Jeff, what's your in case you missed it this week?
Yeah, I picked a story here talking about Mexico and the EU revamping their trade agreement. So basically those two entities last week announced a revamped trade agreement that would substantially increase trade investment, they hope. This was put out days before President Trump was inaugurated. Now, the new global trade agreement between Mexico and the 27 bloc EU would reduce Mexican tariffs on agri-food imports from Europe, remove a number of barriers that would allow European companies to more easily invest in Mexico, and boost Mexican imports of raw materials like antimony, copper, zinc, and lead. Those last ones are important because we're talking about lithium-ion batteries and different things like that. So those raw materials are becoming more and more important. Thought this was interesting not because of the impact right now immediately. Obviously, this is in response to those tariffs that President Trump has talked about leveraging on Mexico specifically, starting February 1st, potentially.
February 1st, yep.
I think we're going to see more of this. I think we're going to see Canada and Mexico and other areas around the world starting to open up and make it easier to get to these North American countries. Mm-hmm. They're going to take advantage of this. They're going to leverage some of the things that President Trump is doing to try to make best for them. And it makes a lot of sense for those companies to do so. If they're going to be potentially limiting their opportunities here in the U.S. because of those tariffs, they're going to seek other opportunities. Now, with this one, we look at what Mexico sends over to the EU. It's about 1/10 of what they send to the U.S. Okay. And you can look at that two ways. You can see all the different geographic obstacles in their way. You can see the fact that it's just going to be harder just logistically to get product to the EU. Mm-hmm. Or you can say that's a huge opportunity to grow, okay? Yeah. Because you've got a lot of stuff now that you could find a new home for. And if you've got relaxed tariffs and you've got a welcome home for all this stuff, looks pretty interesting. And you also look at a lot of those American companies that have looked at nearshoring and look at Mexico very prominently. Maybe now they're going to be competing with some of these European companies that also want to take advantage of being that much closer to the U.S. And maybe all of a sudden, U.S. companies aren't welcomed with open arms the way they were in the past. I understand there's a lot of maybes, a lot of speculations. We don't know what's going to happen. Yeah. But this is also what happens when you start, sort of waking, sleeping
giants.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I agree. Like, I think one thing that a lot of these different territories have done is made it very simple. Like, hey, if these tariffs go through, this is going to cost you 25% more. If this goes through, this is going to be twice as expensive. And kind of fighting on the same level as, Trump has when it comes to threatening these tariffs. Anna, did you get a chance to check out this article? What did you think about the potential trade agreement?
Yeah, I mean, I read it the same way as Jeff, as global countries looking for opportunities here, and maybe they're emboldening or bolstering existing partnerships or expanding them and trying to make some of that stuff work better for them. And it is a little bit concerning for me to see that stuff happening, not knowing what the outcome will be with what we're doing. But
yeah, you want to be isolationist? Fine. We'll go somewhere else. All right. Well, before we get out of here this week, let's jump into our final thoughts. Anna, what's your final thought this week?
I just want to say that I enjoyed this week observing from afar all of my friends that live in far-flung locations in the United States getting snow that don't normally get snow. Yeah. And being here in Wisconsin and having no snow. Yeah. It was freezing cold, but we had no snow all week. And then I think that Wisconsin at some point just got like jealous or was just like, what? Fine. Yeah. So then we got like a half an inch of snow yesterday, just like for funsies. Yeah. Just to like be involved. But
for me, I always wonder what those actual like snow situations look like, because I went through one of those terrible storms in New Jersey once, and it was like literally kicking a little bit of ice off the car, and I'm like, all right, we're fine to go. So they're like, what are we gonna do about these snow events? And my initial reaction was like, maybe buy a shovel. I don't know.
Well, but people don't have all-wheel drive, and they don't have shovels, and they don't have scrapers, and they don't have all-season tires.
Utilities don't understand stuff like salting.
There's no salting, sanding. There's no plow trucks, like any of that. So I get that it is disruptive for a community that's not used to that. But
completely understand. That's why I was, what a real opportunity for somebody with a truck full of shovels to bring it down there.
Oh, and it's funny, the difference, because we're so used to it. Like it snowed yesterday. I did not even look at the forecast. Yeah. And then I was like, oops, I forgot to send my kids to school with boots. Yeah. And nobody cared, and they did not care. And
it's like
it's just like the difference between like everyone in Tallahassee, Florida, my friend is, and she was like, we got snow, and everybody like went bananas. We shut everything down.
What are we gonna do?
And here we are. We're like, oh, oops. I'm sorry that. Yeah.
Yeah. No, it's
sorry, I missed it.
The kids looked out the window. It snowed, and I'm like, kinda. Yeah. Yeah. There's snow on the ground. Yeah. We're not sledding.
Get back to me after 3 or 4 inches, and we'll.
My final thought this week was that this weekend I went to a 90s themed birthday party.
Ooh.
And I haven't been to one of these theme parties, at least in a long time, one that I can remember. And man, it was a lot of fun. It was a lot of fun. The only part that wasn't great fun was everyone was like, well, what are you going to wear and where are you getting it from? And I'm like, I'm going to wear any number of things and I'm going to get them from my closet because they're from the 90s. And it was crazy going through the tote of like just old shirts that I have and just trying to figure out which one.
You have shirts from the 90s?
I do, but part of this was I collected, when I would go to concerts, I would buy a concert t-shirt and like put it in this collection.
Okay, concert tees only. I can get behind that.
If you're like saving clothes, that's a little weird.
No, but they were all weird. So like I narrowed it down to I had a Fish concert t-shirt from 99 and it said 99 in the back and it had the like dark blue white fringe and then like the mesh inside, to keep you cool.
Yeah.
I had an XFL shirt from the original XFL. And I decided to go with a deep cut. I went with a place that I worked in the 90s. I still had a bunch of the shirts because they were kind of popular in my school, so I got them for everybody. And I wore them and I didn't think like, oh, only 5 people from my family at this party or 5 people that I know will even get this. Everyone else was just like, why didn't you buy the full suit with the bucket hat from Amazon? And
it's a 90s party.
I'm like,
dude.
I actually wore this in the 90s. And they're like, you wore that in the 90s? I'm like, yes.
So what is the most 90s thing to you?
For me, well, actually, one guy came dressed up as Max from Saved by the Bell, the owner of the Mac.
Yes. Was he on skates?
He wasn't on skates, but he had the full shirt with all the different shapes and the glasses. And I thought he did a really great job. I mean, the people with sort of the like day glow jumpsuit and the bucket hat, that was cool too. But I don't know. For me, 90s was I wore like bracelets. I had an ID bracelet that I wore that it was gifted to me in high school. I had a decorative silver bracelet. I thought I had a bunch of old Fossil watches. Yeah. And I must have gotten rid of those at some point in the move. I used to have a bunch of the like Pacific Sunwear broken like stone necklaces.
Oh yeah, those were everywhere.
Yeah, and I couldn't find one of those, but the one necklace I did find was like an old all the guys that I used to play football with, we got them with their number on them. But it was like so frail. I'm like, I don't want it. It's going to break. I'm going to lose it.
Did you get the tribal tattoo band too?
I thought, so I used to have a shirt that like had a fake tribal tattoo on it. Wow. And luckily, God, that is long gone. But it was also kind of funny to see people, they got those necklaces and they're like, oh, they're so pinchy. I'm like, yeah, that's what you went through. They were super pinchy. They look so great. Also, I unfortunately cut my hair recently, and it's just not growing so fast these days. But I thought like if I frosted the tips for the party and then just cut it off. But like I have a feeling that doing that in the 90s is maybe why it's not growing in so well these days. But it was
so much more to talk about there, but we won't.
But no, it was so the final thought is that, it was fun to go out and just kind of cut loose for a minute. And then also 90s karaoke. Sometimes it takes a little bit to get you to go behind that karaoke machine, but when you can sing like Third Eye Blind and Little Mercy Playground, and it was fun. It was a good time.
Good deal.
Jeff, what's your final thought this week?
Just want to say thanks to the folks at ECI Software. Got to go down there and talk at their sales meeting the other day. It was cold in Dallas though too. I was hoping to get a little bit of a reprieve from the weather. Not so much.
Oh no.
But great group, lots of questions, lots of conversation. So really appreciate the opportunity to do that. That was a lot of fun.
Nice. And that's a software conference?
It was their sales force. Oh, so they had their folks in to just kind of, they've got a lot going on there in terms of acquisitions, new products. And I was just welcome down to talk about the stuff we talk about here all the time.
Nice.
Talk about the industry.
Yeah, just in plugging the podcast,
They did allow me to do some shameless promotion, and I appreciate that.
No, that's awesome. I mean, that's a really cool opportunity. And I always like it when we can get out in the industry and see what questions other people are asking. And so it's kind of cool that you let people pepper you with questions for like 90 minutes.
It's good stuff.
Just like, whoa, that is a lifetime out there. Jeff doing crowd work. All right. Before we get out of here, please make sure to like, share, and subscribe to the podcast. You could also help us out a lot by leaving the podcast a positive review on whatever platform you use. If you want to email the podcast, you can reach any of us at Jeff, David, or Anna at IEN.com with email the podcast in the subject line. You could also subscribe to our daily newsletter. Make sure you get it delivered to your inbox first. All right. For Jeff Reinke and Anna Wells, I'm David Manty. This is the Today in Manufacturing podcast, and we will see you next week.